I was a kid, it was a routine to visit our grandparents during the summer vacations. We used to stay in the village for minimum 15 to 20 days. There was huge mango orchard in the village, just a kilometer away from our home. In the orchard, many villagers have their mango trees. We used to go there at noon and play games in the shade of trees. One day I was teasing one of my cousins, and he got really pissed up. He ran after me to beat me, and I just ran and ran. After running for some 15 minutes, I stopped and looked back. He was nowhere. I looked back again and could not see any mango tree. There were just distant barren fields with no villages, no trees, no people in sight. It is to be noted that mango trees are huge, and they can be seen from a long distance, while I had just run for approximately 15 minutes. I thought I had run in a straight line, so if I go back along that line, I would reach back to that place. After walking for some 30 minutes, I saw a monastery kind of structure situated in between the fields. It felt odd to me that why would a temple be built in this place while there are no people, villages in sight? But I also felt that I may be able to find someone there who can tell me the directions to reach back to home. Due to the scorching summers and so much physical exercise, I was thirsty too. There was a hand pump visible to me. Hence, I went to that place and started drinking water from the hand pump. At that moment, I saw a man with yellow dhoti kind of clothing walking towards me. I noticed his disability in one leg. He could walk very slowly. He had a mark on his forehead. To cut long story short, he seemed like the priest of the temple to me. He tapped on my shoulder and asked, "Who are you, son?" I told him my name and remained busy in drinking water. At the moment, I looked back to ask him directions. He was nowhere to be found. Being a crippled, he could not just have run, and he was vanished. I was frightened. I started running away from that place, unaware of the directions. I was crying and reciting Hanuman Chalisa. I ran and ran. After running for I don't know how long, I again saw a similar type of structure, but not in that ruined condition. I didn't have the courage to go inside, but then I saw a few people sitting under a peepal tree. I went there, frightened, and asked them about the way to home. They asked my grandfather's name. Being a small village, everybody knew everyone and told me the way to home. As I exited from another side, everything was a familiar sight. My home was close. I knew where I was and how to go home. At night, I narrated the whole incident to my grandfather. He told me, long time back, somewhere near the mango orchard, there was a monastery which had a crippled priest. In the monastery, there was a very costly idol of Lord Krishna. One day, dacoits killed the priest and looted the monastery. They took away the idol too. Now, there is no monastery in this place. There are mango trees on that place. It was too incredible for me. I could not grasp all this. I urged my grandfather to once come with me and look for that place, just for me. He agreed for this. We looked for that place on the same time in the mid-noon for 1 to 2 hours, but never found it. Some points. One. No matter for how long I walked or in which direction, there was never a place from where the mango trees were not visible. 2. I could not understand, but I drank water from a place which did not existed. 3. Was it the priest who guided me back home? I could never find answers to these questions, and I don't think I will ever find the answers. This is the biggest mystery for me till date. I don't know this may going to be the best, but maybe the one that can make you to feel fear in your nerves. This is the story of a guy who is 56 years old now and busy, who was just like me, exploring the world of devils and negative energy. It was 1985 and he was in his 20s and had recently heard about the women who was staying alone in the A hut. There were rumors that women was died and buried in the 1960 itself. But she came up from the cemetery after a year and started to live in the same house from that date to now. She wasn't scaring anyone, but was just living her life as she lived earlier, but wasn't coming out of her house to buy anything. The only reason for her to be out is that to get some guava fruit that was food for her. Now, this man was interested on her backstory and spent some more time researching on her. And he got an extra info about her native. He had planned to secretly watch her at the night and decided to say that he was living the place for 3 days. He spent his whole day in the house of his friend and walked on the road that leads to her house at 10 p.m. By 10:30, he had reached her place, and he had made that daring to view in the window and saw that women boiling the guava in the water and started to eat that after 5 minutes. He took a photo of her and went back, and he knew that every year she visits her cemetery on the day she died. He was struggling in his mind because of the question, how can he capture and dead women in the camera? After 3 months, it was the day when she was died. At 12 midnight, he noticed her coming out of her house with a bag that's filled of something. She went near the cemetery and kneeled down and began to cry in front of the cemetery, and she was saying, "Aka, Aka." Sister, sister. He was shocked and immediately went back to his house. Next day, he went to native of that woman and inquired about the women and got to know that they both were twins, sisters, and the one who was living had gone mad after knowing about her sister's death and went somewhere. He had spreaded this news all over the village and made the people to help her. My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame setting on a concrete block foundation. I have been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and me have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music, but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed, 'cause I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement, but the tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and out into the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now the basement is not clean with full sight lines. There had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So, after my brother walks back, He is about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye he sees it. It is a shadowy figure right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you are in the presence of a spirit or a ghost and you felt a bad vibe, to say quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you. I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him, still holding his food container. In one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard, but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight. He is already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked, "So then, who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?"